Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm going to be continuing my beginner to knitting series. In the last one, I taught you guys how to do the knit stitch, and then we made this little swatch. This is called the garter stitch. It's where you knit on the front and back every row. So this time I'm going to be teaching you how to make the purl stitch, and then for the swatch that is going to be called a stockinette. We're going to go back and forth between a knitting row and a purl row. So I have my yarn here. This is a 5-weight yarn. It recommends the knitting needle size of 6.5 millimeters. So I have my 6.5 millimeter needles right here. These are 9 inches long. They are wooden clover needles. And then I also have some scissors. So let's get started learning our purl stitch. In the first video, I also taught you how to cast on. So if you don't know how, I recommend you go back and watch the first instructional video. But basically, I found a length for my tail. Now I'm going to tie a slip knot. I'll put that on one of my needles, tighten it down, and then I will set it up for the cast on process. I'm going to pick the outside, inside, go through the hole, and drop my thumb, tighten it up. I'm going to be casting on 10 stitches for our example today. Like I said, if you need help learning how to cast on, I did a full in-depth explanation in our first beginner to knit video. So now that we've got everything all cast on, I'm going to transfer all of my stitches into my left hand. I'm going to hold my working yarn and I'm going to tension it with my left hand while I am holding my needle. I'm going to pick up my empty needle with my right hand, and then this is how I'm going to get started. We're going to be learning how to do the purl stitch today. So to do the purl stitch, you're actually going to want to have your working yarn in the front. So I'm going to bring this around so it is sitting in the front of my stitches. Whenever we did the knit stitch, it was in the back, but now we are going to be starting with it in the front. Okay? To start our purl, we're going to take our right needle and we're going to go on the right side. We're going to go through the front of our loop. We're going to go right through the bottom there. We're going to come out on the front side, making an X like this. Now what I want to do is I want to take my working yarn and I want to wrap it around my needle like this. And then I'm going to take that yarn that I just wrapped around my front needle and I want to pull it through this hole and towards the back. Just like that. Now we've done our purl stitch, so we can go ahead and take this and it's going to slide off the top of our left needle and it's going to sit on our right needle like that. Okay, our working yarn is still in the front. We just did our first purl. Now let's do another one. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to go into the front of this stitch, the right side. I'm going to go right through the bottom, out the other side, and I've crossed, keeping my right needle in the front. Okay, I'm going to take my working yarn, and this is going to wrap around the front and then through the middle like this. And then from here, I want to be pulling this yarn that we just wrapped. It's going to go right through this hole that we went through, like this. And there's your purl stitch. So after you've completed that, you can pull the loop all the way off. And there you go. And make sure your working yarn is in front. And we're going to do that all again. So I'm going to go from my right side through the bottom and to the left side. I'm going to take my working yarn, I'm going to wrap it around the front and in the middle. I'm going to take that loop, pull it through the loop that we just went through, like so. I'm going to take this and pull it off. So now we've done 3 purl stitches. Let's do another one. Making sure my working yarn is in front. Going to go through the bottom. I'm going to go towards the front. Cross my needles like this. I'm going to wrap my yarn around my needle, front, and then through the middle. I'm going to pull that loop through. And now that's done, and I'll pull the whole thing off. Okay, so this is how you do a purl stitch. I'm going to do the rest of them. You can watch slowly, follow along. All right, so there was the last one. Here's how my stitches look. So that is a full row of purls. Now you can practice this over and over again as many times just to get a hold of the purl stitch. I personally think it's a little bit harder than the knit stitch, so it took a little while to get used to, but definitely it is important. So go ahead and practice that purl stitch. For this little square that we're making, we're going to be doing the stockinette stitch, which means I'm going to alternate between rows of purl stitch and then a full row of the knit stitch. I'm going to go back to the purl stitch, do a row of knit stitch, row of purl stitch, so on and so forth. So from here, I'm going to be turning my work. And I'm going to do a row of knitting stitches, okay? I did teach everyone how to do the knit stitch in my first tutorial, so if you need a refresher, go watch that and come back here. But I will just be doing regular knit stitches. All right, I went all the way across, and this is what my work is looking like. This is just 2 rows. My purl row and my knit row. So as you can tell, the 2 sides are quite different from each other. So this would be the side that we are knitting on. Yeah. And whenever you turn it over, this is the side that we are purling on. And they look quite different, yeah? So it should be pretty easy to remember what to do based on what side you're looking at. So I just did this row. This is my knitting row. I'm going to turn my work and I want to do another row of purls now to continue with the pattern. So I'm going to get my yarn ready. I'm holding it with my left hand, keeping it nice and tensioned, and it is towards the front of my work. And I'm going to start doing my purls. So I'm going to go in from the front, go through the bottom, come out the other side. We're going to wrap our yarn around our right needle like this. We're going to pull that loop through there. After you've done that, you've finished your purl, so you can just take that whole thing off your needle. Now we want to do the next one. Make sure your yarn is in front. So I'm going to go through the loop, through the bottom. I'm going to go towards the front and up. I'm going to wrap my yarn around. And I'm going to pull that loop through. That completes my purl, and I'll pull the whole thing off my hook, my needle, sorry. And our purl stitches are going to continue across. This is a great time to practice your purls. Okay, so there is our full row of the purl stitches that we just did. So to continue with the stockinette pattern, after we do a row of purls, we're going to flip it and we're going to do a row of knit stitches. All right, so there's the end of that row. This is how the front of our work is looking. And this is how the back of the work is looking. I'm going to get ready to do purls, so I'll hold my yarn to the front of my work. I'll go through the stitch from the right side, through the front to the left side. I'm going to wrap around like this, hold it down in the center and pull it through that loop. Once you've done that, pull the whole thing off and then you can start your next purl. Through, wrap, pull it through and pull it off. Through, wrap, pull it through, pull it off. All right, so I'm just going to do a couple more rows to kind of finish off the square, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like. All right, here is what my swatch is looking like after quite a few rows. This is the front, and this is the back. This is the side that you would do purl stitches on. This is the side that you would do a knit row on. But remember, this is alternating knit and purl, back and forth, back and forth. So I would like to cast off now, which just means I'm going to close off all these stitches, get the project off, turn it into a little square. So whenever I'm going to cast off, I want to make sure that I do it on the front side where we would do a knit row. So I'm going to knit my first 2 stitches. And then from here, I'm going to take my left needle. I'm going to grab my first stitch on the right needle. And I'm going to pull this over and off my needle while keeping on the second one right here. Now moving on, I'm going to knit another stitch. And we'll do it again. I'm going to grab the first loop over here. I'm going to pull it off and over, all while keeping this loop on the whole time. Knit one, take this one, pull it over and off. Right, there's the last one. From here, you can cut off your yarn. I'm going to pull this out a bit, and then I like to run my end through this loop just one more time and pull it tight. And then here you have your little swatch of the stockinette stitch. This is alternating rows of the purl stitch and the knit stitch. So in the last tutorial, I taught you guys how to do the garter stitch, which looks like this. This is what happens if you knit every row front and back. Interestingly enough, this is also what happens if you purl every single row front and back, because a purl is actually just a backwards knit stitch. If that makes any sense. If it doesn't make sense, you can ignore that. But anyway, guys, the main focus of this tutorial was to teach you how to do the purl stitch along with the knitting stitch that we learned in our first tutorial in order to create the stockinette. I hope this tutorial was helpful. You should definitely watch the first tutorial if you haven't already. And that is all I have for you today, so I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!